On June 6, 1944, Americans awoke to the news that the Allied invasion of Normandy was underway. That morning, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt offered a prayer for the troops who were already in the thick of what he called a struggle to set free a suffering humanity. General Dwight D. Eisenhower told those troops, "The eyes of the world are upon you." Today we look back on that struggle as a defining moment in human history, and our eyes still look upon those who serve with pride and gratitude.
275 days of continual combat.
That's how Frank Towers spent 9 months beginning in the summer of 1944 as a first lieutenant in the 30th Infantry Division of the United States Army, also known as Old Hickory, serving in perhaps the most important military campaign of the 20th century, the Allied invasion of France. Before taking part in the invasion, he spent a year in training at Camp Blanding in Stark, Florida, a long way from his boyhood home in Vermont. The year was 1941.
These were 16-men tents. 16 of us lived in one of those tents for a full year. That was real togetherness. We were getting ready to go back to Vermont in December when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and at that point, of course, we were in for the duration.
Towers joined the officer corps and eventually wound up as a liaison officer in Britain, waiting for the Allied invasion to begin.
We had been joking about it in England that we were going to be glad to get across the channel and get in contact with the Germans, and we were going to wipe them out in just a few days and the war was going to be all over with. Well, we found out it was a different story. Once we got there, it was hard slugging. From day to day, dodging bullets, trying to be in a foxhole and not be hit with shrapnel from the artillery.
Fighting was fierce and costly, and the terrain was difficult. Eventually, the hard work began to pay off.
We liberated our first village on the 7th of July, which was nearly 3 weeks from the time we started into combat to go the first 5 miles. The name of the village was St. Jean de Day. It's a very small village, about 800 people. And from our artillery, from the German artillery, from the American Air Force bombing the area, there was very little left of the town. But as soon as we arrived in the town, the people just seemed to come from nowhere and were very joyous, jubilant to greet their American liberators.
Towers didn't stop to think of the significance of the liberation of the village then. He didn't have time to. The American forces were on the move.
From that point on, it was town after town after town that we were liberating. We didn't know who these people were, but all we knew was that we were driving the German army back out of this occupied country, and that was our mission.
Judging by their pre-invasion bravado, the 30th Infantry expected victory. But part of the mission Towers did not expect still waited.
We were told before we went into Germany about the concentration camps, the torture, the life that these people had to lead. We didn't believe that, because I could not do that to you. How could these human beings in the German army, how could they do that to these Jews? This is propaganda. We just couldn't believe it until we liberated our first prison camp. Then we believed. This is the reality of war. And this is the condition that we found these people in. They were nothing but skin and bones. And even those who were surviving, they were nothing but skin and bones, just dragging themselves along on the ground. They had no mercy on these people, just because they were Jews. That was the only reason.
The 30th Infantry's darkest hours came in a tiny French village named Mortain. It was there the Nazi Army counterattack almost succeeded in splitting U.S. forces between General Hodges' First Army and General Patton's Third Army. Despite early enemy gains, a determined 30th Infantry was able to hold on to the crucial high ground of Hill 314, preventing the Germans from gaining control of the roadways.
The German High Command later said that was the most critical turning point of the entire war. That had the Germans been able to capture that hill, what we call Hill 314, they could have easily driven us back to the sea, and that would have been the end of the war. We would have lost had it not been for the Battle of Mortain. From that time on, it was a downhill ride for the German army.
U.S. and British forces pressed on and eventually drove into the heart of Nazi Germany.
We ended up at Magdeburg, Germany, which was about 50 miles southwest of Berlin. And that's when the war ended on the 8th of May.
After the war, Towers returned to the United States and settled in Alachua County. But in a way, it seems a part of him is still on the European front. He volunteers at the Camp Blanding World War II Museum and Memorial Park and serves as president and historian of the 30th Infantry Division, Veterans of World War II. He co-founded the Flowers of Memory, which allows French families to adopt one of the 15,000 gravesites of American servicemen buried in Normandy and Brittany cemeteries. And he still makes frequent visits to France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, recently visiting St. Jane d'Day, that first village he helped to liberate almost 64 years ago.
I go back there. In fact, I was back there last month, and the people greeted me just as joyfully as they did the first day that they were liberated.
For County Update, I'm Alan Yetter.